Some of you who are new to the community may not know the legend of Nilosi. Who is Nilosi? Well, she is the legendary Lady of Our Hearts, leader of the Sildretor faction, which thematically enough, Von Karstein has brought in this particular replay. This one from him on Discord. Let's take a look at this land battle up against the Ogres. Nilosi is famous for getting butchered in many of the Dark Elf trailers, so she's going to not try to get butchered today by the Slaughtermaster of the Great Maw. Front line of Bleak's Dread Spears, rather, makes a lot of sense. Some Bleak Swords as well. Nilosi here on a cold one. We've got double Manticore, Shades as well, Sorceress of Death, Dark Riders, and Cold One Knights on each flank. Or rather, the Dark Rider being replaced by the Slaanesh Harvesters, Doomfire Warlocks on the opposite flank. So for the Ogres, we've got Slaughtermaster of the Great Maw up leading the way, and some Iron Fists, Bulls with Noblars as a meat shield, some Trappers hanging around as well, some regular Bulls as kind of a second line, Arwar Powder Guts, the Man-Eater Pistols, and some Lead Belchers for some more range pressure, Saber Tusk pack over on the side. Let's see how they get on. Immediately, the Powder Guts are going to open up, start to use their pistols to blast the Manticore out of the sky. Not going to do too much, but the Lead Belchers will do quite a bit to the infantry. Of course, mostly cheap infantry to shoot at, but it's still somewhat threatening. All these relatively cost-effective, cheap spears. But let's get back to Nilosi. So on the cold one, obviously, she's got armor-piercing melee damage. Mainly, she offers in multiplayer this really nice +5 melee attack strength through Spite, especially if you're fighting with anti-large type units, which tend to have lower, well, I should say, like anti-large infantry, right? Like spears and halberds tend to have lower attack. That little bit of an attack buff is extra good on them. And just in general, given some of the buffs to Dark Elves recently, I would definitely say that it's a very nice little AoE buff to have. But Nilosi taking no prisoners, not wanting to end up as somebody's lunch, dinner, whatever. Go straight for the Slaughtermaster here. Try and get him off the field as quickly as possible. Of course, he can self-heal, but a little bit of a Spirit Leech there also on the Powder Guts. While the Manticores and the Cavalry swept in the back line, they were able to wreck a unit of Lead Belchers outright. Saber Tusk packs proving little more than a speed bump for those Cold One Knights on the periphery. That being said, Slaanesh Harvester is a very squishy unit, definitely going to take significant damage in a prolonged melee engagement with those Ogre infantry. And the other Manticore also gets enraged by the Lead Belcher fire straight into some Bulls, which is a very cost-inefficient engagement. As great as Manticores are, getting circle beaten by angry Ogres only costs 500 points. It's going to be a very bad engagement for them. Also over here, Powder Guts, one of the things about them, once they start losing combat, will actually get a buff that significantly increases their melee stats, so they're going to be able to hold quite some time here. Murderous Prowess also kicking off. Will, of course, buff up the Dark Elves. Melee attack, charge bonus, leadership, missile damage, although not melee damage, interestingly enough. Anyway, Nilosi and her lieutenant here are going to go 2v1. Slaughtermaster, peg-legged, hobbling on out of there, trying to stay out in front. He really can move, considering he's only got one leg. But 54 speed is still not quite enough. Oh man, the Dreadlord gets blasted in the face by some Lead Belchers, but it's actually not going to do that much. The Manticore also eventually ends up in a situation where it's not actually surrounded by the Bulls. Much better, it can actually just nope out of that engagement and rear charge these Lead Belchers here. Do a great job of that. Slaanesh Harvesters and the Cold One Knights also managed to get away from the Noblars there, start to come help in other parts of the battlefield. This Feral Manticore is probably done though, as are those Cold One Knights. Dark Riders trying to push up and around here, while the infantry fight is just, you know, Dread Spears, Bleak Swords, fighting Bulls. Do you really want to see that? Because we can. And with the Sildretor color scheme, these bloody Elves just look that much more on theme. Another Spirit Leech there over on... Yeah, it looks like it was maybe misclicked. Probably meant for the Slaughtermaster, but instead goes on those Bulls. Still, though, Slaughtermaster is very likely to go down. Drops a little fist bump there. Doesn't really hit much, but still, these Bulls come back around. Gonna get a pretty bad engagement versus the Slaanesh Harvesters and these Cold One Knights, but Noblar support not quite on point of where it needs to be. It could have been quite a bit better. There you go, a little bit of aspect of the Dread Knight just to give those Slaanesh Harvesters terror, try and terrify away some of these units. Oh, man. Just, like, face palming. I understand. That Slaughtermaster not feeling too good about his life decisions at this point. Lead Belchers are going to try and get back in here, though. They have dealt with the Manticore. Suddenly, Nolosi finds herself a little bit surrounded by bulls, but the Ogre leadership is just suffering so badly at this point. The Shades are also able to provide some nice missile saturation there to also help break up the leadership. And as wounded as the Manticores are, they still cause terror. Still are going to be just a menace for the Ogres to deal with. Meanwhile, Deathcaster comes in with spears and Dread Knights, and man, those Dread Knights look good with that red and gold color scheme. Sildra has to be one of the best color schemes for Dark Elves for sure, so of course it would be. It's Nolosi's color scheme. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed watching that one. Nolosi herself, not very expensive. We'll look at the cost here after the fact. I mean, the fact that she's able to tank a bunch of damage and survive is good. The support buff is also nice. Slaanesha's Harvesters and the Anti-Large Cavalry obviously going to be very good here. Cold One Knights generally be very nice. I think on Ogre Kingdom's side, I'd probably go with a very different composition and probably not go for a missile-based build. I don't know, Lead Belchers, they're good, but I don't completely love them in a lot of land battle contexts. I think the thing about Dark Elves is they're relatively squishy, so if you can just hit them really hard, they're going to fall over. So I'd probably go for a more concerted kind of rush, a damage-focused build. Maybe take some Ogre Cavalry as well, since they tend to just crush units outright. Get it? Crushers. Anyway. Yeah, Sorceress of Death here. Pretty decent job, kind of providing some extra damage and leadership hits. Same thing. The Shades do a decent job. Manticores reasonably well limited, but still pay for themselves. Red Spears, Bleak Swords, although individually don't pay for themselves, just still trade generally cost effective. The Man-Eaters, probably one of the bright spots of this. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of the Lead Belchers here. In land battles, they can be a little bit tricky to protect. Dark Elves definitely have very strong mobility. Excellent light cavalry, plus harpies, plus pretty good knights. Manticores, there's just a lot of pressure here. Try and keep these guys shooting, and I think, again, you'd just be better off to go with more of a damage-focused build. A lot of units actually are going to struggle to pay for themselves, but the Trappers, surprisingly enough, did not. Maybe you want to actually max Trappers in this matchup just to give you a little bit of extra ranged chip and kind of battlefield control. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. It's definitely a matchup I need to play more from both sides. But again, just kind of thinking about things here from a perspective of both sides. So quickly, let's just look at Nolosi's costs. You guys understand kind of what she brings to the table. So, I mean, obviously, we've got this Shield of Grond, which is also, again, pretty good against Ogres. I didn't really highlight this, but 12% base weapon damage, considering a lot of the bulls are non-AP. That's actually pretty decent. And Hydra Blade, if you have the extra gold, this would be nice to give herself a nice weapon strength buff, but a great mount selection can take the Black Dragon, of course, but in multiplayer, it's probably going to be a lot more cost-effective to take her on the Cold One or the Dark Steed. The Cold One in particular, 115 armor, plus good armor-piercing weapon damage. She has great stats, 65-55 for a unit this cheap, and not that much HP, but definitely has some ability. I mean, you could even go cheaper at 1200 if you don't want any support abilities, but definitely quite solid for the cost. And then, of course, if we go over here on the other side and look at the Ogre Kingdoms, just quickly on some build notes. Yeah, you know, the Crushers are expensive enough, but their damage output is so ludicrous that I might still try and take them. They are going to be vulnerable to the armor-piercing shooting of, like, Shades and stuff, so, you know, maybe you want to take the shielded variant, or maybe you just want to go super wide with lots of stuff, you know, lots of, like, tons of bulls, and probably max Saber Tusk packs as well. Iron Blaster, if you're going with a wide cheap build, having a couple of elite units isn't a bad idea, as long as you can still field a full army. But Iron Blaster, again, just the high damage of this is going to be really nasty for a lot of Dark Elf units to deal with, I feel like. Plus, it'll put pressure on their mobility, where they're going to have to respond to this, and you can kind of counter-respond with your own mobility. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. It's definitely an interesting one. Definitely an interesting matchup that needs to be explored more, but what I'm looking forward to, if you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button every time I upload a new video. You'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.